Over the years, I've picked up some habits that make my tarot readings so much clearer and more meaningful to me. They might not work for everyone, but they work for me, so I'm sharing them with you today in case they help you too. Hello, everybody. It's Sylvie. Welcome back to Tarot Magpie. I hope you're doing all kinds of good today. This video was selected for you by my lovely patrons over on Patreon. So thank you to you in the nestlings and fledglings tiers. There is a link in my description to my Patreon if you want to come check us out, see what we've got going on over there. So today I'm talking about the little things that had a big impact on my tarot practice, things that dramatically improve my tarot readings. These are the things that I've sort of developed over the years, tried out over the years, that I've found that work for me to take my practice from like fine to feeling really insightful. And they helped me feel, or this whole process has helped me feel a lot more confident in my tarot reading for myself and enjoy my readings a whole lot more. Disclaimer, I suppose, these are personal techniques. They're things that work for me. I don't think any of them are groundbreaking. None of them are brand new, I don't think. That would be quite a surprise. They've helped me deepen my practice, make it more reflective, make it more insightful, make it more valuable for me. And like I say, they've really boosted my confidence in my readings. And that has just had a bit of a knock-on effect, generally speaking, with everything tarot related. I feel a lot more comfortable reading cards. And part of that is just time and practice. That obviously is going to be the number one tip, is the more you read, the better you're going to be at it, or the more comfortable you're going to feel. But yeah, these are things that work for me. I hope that you will find this video interesting, maybe try some things out and adapt them to your own practice. So I'm going to get into it. The first thing I found really helpful, that felt like honestly such a game changer, was to use voice notes to capture my immediate first impressions of the cards. I am someone who loves to overthink. It is what my brain naturally does. And honestly, I enjoy kind of rabbit holing down into the connections between the cards and all the different facets of meaning. But something that really helped my readings was just to put my phone into a voice memo, voice recording, and just capture my initial first impressions. A lot of them feel really kind of not stupid, because that's a very harsh assessment of myself, but they feel like the really obvious things. It's like, oh, I pull the magician and my first thought is like manifesting something, bringing together things in front of me to create something. Like they're the very kind of 101 keyword, almost not exactly surface level, because I don't want to imply that they're shallow, but they're the kind of most obvious impressions of the card, I suppose. And by getting that out in a voice note, it means I can kind of get all of my surface level thoughts out of my brain, and I've got them recorded somewhere so that I can kind of circle back to it. Because also I often find that I have a lot of insights that I don't really realize are insightful until I've thought a bit deeper, and then I can come back and kind of connect the dots for myself. Personally, I've also found that talking out loud helps me to kind of unlock things. And I think this is very personal. I'm somebody who talks to myself all the livelong day. I work from home. I'm the only one at home during the day. I have a constant stream of consciousness running conversation with myself. It's how I process stuff. So it seemed so obvious to voice record my initial impressions, but it wasn't obvious to me. It took me a good few years of reading tarot before I started doing this, but I found it really, really helpful. If you don't like doing voice recordings, then maybe some like stream of consciousness writing would do the trick. Or even just speaking aloud without recording, maybe typing on a computer or something that's a little bit faster than handwriting, if that's the route you usually go. Something that allows you to get your like first impressions, surface level thoughts out of your head. It kind of sets the tone, and then you can come back and like fill in the gaps and explain to yourself why you've made those connections. A lot of these are really obvious. I think all of these feel really obvious actually now I say them out loud, but sometimes you need someone to tell you the obvious thing. So next up, using my tools, because my brain can't store everything. And this is something that I think I felt the most conflicted about, but once I started doing it, I had a lot more confidence in my reading. And primarily that is checking my own notes. I have spent years, as I'm sure many of us have, filling out journals, writing out card descriptions, collecting our books and taking down notes of our favorite interpretations. And yet there is still sometimes this feeling that if I have to check my own notes in a reading, it means I'm like a fake tarot reader. It means I'm not a good tarot reader. But let's be real, I can't store everything in my head. I simply don't have that much like hard drive space in my brain. And as for the idea that it feels like cheating, I'm referencing my own insights. You know, sometimes I've taken notes from other sources, but I've picked out the things that resonate with me. I've made them make sense to me. I've incorporated them into my own card meanings. I'm not just like reading somebody else's notes. Although if you take all of your meanings directly from a guidebook or from a tarot resource, I don't want to suggest that that's cheating either. But if you're trying to build a practice where you don't have to refer to an external source, then referring to your own notes can kind of feel like cheating. But if they're your own notes, they're your own notes. Do you know what I mean? Additionally, kind of cross-referencing my current reading with previous notes has helped me see like recurring themes across different readings, which is just really cool. And that's the kind of thing that helps me feel more confident in any intuitive hits that I get from the cards, because I can literally look at the evidence and say like, oh yeah, no, this comes up a lot and it always means this. Additionally, under the heading, as it were, of using the tools that I have, is having and using multiple decks. And I feel like this might be a little bit controversial, but personally, I love having a big deck collection. I love having access to lots of different image interpretations of what are ultimately the same cards with the same meaning. Different decks highlight different facets of a card's meaning, and by using different decks, I get to visually see some of those different interpretations when I do different readings. And it all feeds back into my own notes and my own kind of mental bank of card meanings and card interpretations. As an example, I did a video not too long ago called Same Reading Different Decks, where I pulled the same cards from 3 different decks and compared how I would interpret them differently purely based on the difference in imagery when the actual card meanings were exactly the same. Obviously, this is not going to be accessible to everybody. I have a large deck collection. Not everybody has or wants a large deck collection. And I think looking up alternative artwork online or using deck comparison resources when you're, you know, making notes, if that's something you do, if you have like a tarot journal with the meanings, and just looking at different interpretations can kind of give you the same thing. If you're here on TarotTube, I'm assuming you like to hear what people have to say about the card meanings. Even just listening to different people's takes on the tarot and the kind of different things that they pick out, I think does the same kind of thing. It's giving you different angles, different perspectives on the same cards. Next up is another one that feels extremely obvious to have to say out loud, and that is just giving readings time to unfold and taking my time. Sometimes I mean sitting down for an hour with a spread. Sometimes I mean leaving the cards out on my desk for like a week. It helps take some of the pressure off. It helps go deeper than the surface level conclusion, which tied with the idea of like taking a voice note, getting my surface level thoughts out of my head, and then I can sit, I can take notes, I can do my little mind map, I can cross-reference things, I can read different resources, and just giving myself time to do all that and let it sink in and let it all marinate in my brain and make connections, and taking notes more gradually. That has really helped me get more out of my readings. And I suppose it's like a lot of things, you kind of get out what you put into it. So if you sit down, if you take your time with a reading, if you really let yourself make those connections a little bit more naturally rather than trying to like force a meaning, then personally, I found that to be a lot more valuable. Along with this, revisiting readings like days, even like weeks and months later, I really enjoy looking back over my tarot journal and seeing what the cards had to say. Not so much to check if they were like correct, as it were, but just to see how I was interpreting them and adding the perspective of hindsight onto the perspective I had at the time, and just seeing how my own thinking and understanding has evolved and just reflecting on it. I also just find it really interesting. I love tarot, that's why I'm here. So obviously I enjoy spending lots of time on my readings. Like I said at the beginning, I think practice is the biggest thing that's really improved my tarot readings or made me feel more confident and comfortable with my tarot readings. And I think revisiting readings is like a big part of that. It's nice to view readings as like an ongoing conversation almost, and not just like a one and done event. Okay, my final like big point, my big, I guess, recommendation, if we're calling it that I have incorporated into my practice as a whole that has helped with readings is learning different correspondences and kind of cross-referencing meanings. So studying systems, you knew this was coming. I'm all about a system. Lately, I've been big into astrology and applying that to tarot. So like I pull the Two of Swords, which is actually the reading that the footage that you're watching right now is based on. It's the Two of Swords reading from The Creative Tarot by Chelsea Pippin Mizzy. So the Two of Swords is the moon in Libra, and so it is linked to the moon and the sign of Libra, but also the High Priestess and the Justice card. And having those additional like touchstones of meaning helps me interpret the Two of Swords in any given situation. So for instance, I pull the Two of Swords, which I actually did in this reading. It cropped up in the Two of Swords reading, and maybe at first I'm like, oh, I'm not quite sure how this applies to this specific question, but then I can think about, well, how does elements of the High Priestess and what that represents tie into it? How do elements of Libra tie into it? And I think this is really helpful when you're kind of stumped for answers, because I know that we have all had those readings. I still have those readings where I pull a card and I'm like, I literally have no idea what this card could possibly mean in this context. And so trying to approach it from a different angle, from something else that corresponds with that tarot card, like gives you an entry point, helps you think a little bit more creatively, helps you think a little bit more like sideways and round corners. So things like numerology and I guess Kabbalah, which are not things that I know a lot about, but there are so many different correspondences with tarot. If you've got a specific deck that might be associated with a certain mythology or with fairy tales or with, I don't know, a book series that you're very familiar with, they give you like other points of reference that help you approach that card from a different perspective. Additionally, from the perspective of my broader tarot practice outside just doing readings for myself, because I consider studying to be part of my practice, all of my notes are in what I call my second brain in Obsidian, which is a software program that basically allows you to create your own like personal wiki. It's really good for cross-referencing and linking between pages. And so my notes are this big mishmash of like cross-referenced topics. So I'll have a bunch of topics that I've connected to, for instance, the Emperor card. And that act of like cross-referencing information is also a proven learning technique. The more connections you make, the easier something is to remember, the more kind of fixed it is in the neural structure of your brain. I'm not a neuroscientist. I actually don't know if that's how learning works. It is a proven way of learning and absorbing and retaining information. And at the end of the day, the better we know the cards, the better our readings are going to be, because you can be as intuitive as you like. But if you don't know the card meanings, I would argue you're not reading tarot if you're not referencing the card meanings. I hope that's not a hot take. Cross-referencing, learning different systems, learning correspondences, bringing those all together. It also just makes it more engaging and more fun to study the tarot, but that's just me. So that is everything I had to share with you today. That was a bit of a whirlwind whistle-stop tour through the techniques that I've added into my practice that have really stuck, that have really been valuable, that have really deepened my practice and made me feel more confident in my tarot readings. Capturing first impressions, and as part of that, trying not to overthink, using my tools like my personal notes and the resources like tarot books that I have available to me, giving my readings and myself some space to breathe, both in the reading itself. I'm not trying to get all of my thoughts out in order in one go, and I'm also returning to my readings over time. And finally, exploring different correspondences and different systems to strengthen my understanding of the tarot and add depth to my readings. I would love to hear from you. What do you do to deepen, strengthen, improve your tarot readings? Do you use these techniques? Do they work for you? Have you tried them and they don't work for you? I think that would be really interesting to hear, because I love how everybody's practice is so personal and so different. If there's anything you do that I haven't mentioned, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to try it out. Share your experiences in the comments. That is it from me. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for spending some time with me. I really hope you've enjoyed this one. As I said before, do come check us out on Patreon. We have a lot of fun over there, and there is a link in the description below, as well as a link to my Etsy store. Give this one a like if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.